You're watching The Mic Check, on every Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Hello and welcome everybody to this week's Mic Check. Today we're revisiting an old script, one that we have had some time ago, but that I want to get back into it because I feel that it's really a good example of storytelling incarnate. That's its specific point. So anyway, without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Leonard, you're up first.
Okay. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face because he's afraid of the dark. And she'll sit beside it, numb, and she'll pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus, canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restlessly abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Hatim.
You are here. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket except his face because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb. And she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. Neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time he bewildered. Shocked self managed to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Writ Okay, how do I read this word?
Continentally.
Writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and rivers and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restless abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. How about Kyle?
Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uchi's broken little body with a blanket, except his face because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamicism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abled, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Let's do Terrell.
Okay, let's see. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to some interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uchi's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's too old. She's old hat at this by now. When she thinks then and thereafter, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Written continuity. Oh my gosh. Repeat the word for me one more time.
Continentally.
Okay. Read continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river. Details the usual. Ordinary except for the size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restlessly abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. All right, let's see. Let's go with studio. Can see the full name.
That's against Nathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my that's my other thing that's recording us. That's why I labeled it studio. So
Gotcha.
you mean me? Okay. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with, move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uchi's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it, numb. She will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus, and canyons and river deltas. The usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs and puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Michael.
Which
Okay.
one?
Oh, we got two Michaels.
Oh, which one?
New Michael.
Okay. Tune over.
Alrighty. You are here. Let's start at the end of the world. Why don't we? Get over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, and she imagines her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket except his face, because he is afraid of the dark, and will sit beside it numb, and will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's hold hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this utmost question every time her bewildered, shocked self managed to produce it. He wasn't, not really. By now, he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Written continuity. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus. Canyons and river deltas. The usual. Ordinary except of its size and dynamis. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man. Lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. And you, Michael.
Okay. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither is ending for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Wang.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Okay. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except for his face, because he is afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Okay, who else is left?
Andrea, you there with us? We can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Just listening in. Okay. By the way, congratulations, Andrea. If you guys haven't heard, she landed a pretty major role. Can you go ahead and tell us what that was again? Oh, we'll wait for her to respond. But yeah, she landed something pretty cool. There it is. She is the radio imaging voice for iHeartRadio's K-pop channel. So, congrats to you. All right. So everybody's had a chance to read it.
Wow.
We're at, yeah, I know, pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and start breaking the script down, shall we? This is a good time to have maybe a Word document or something on the side, somewhere where you can take some notes and keep some of your ideas straight. So let's talk about this particular script. I usually like to ask this question. It's kind of a given now, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. What kind of script is this? Is this audio only or audio visual?
This would be audio book.
Yes. Yes, this is an audio only script. The reason why you generally want to identify the difference between the two is because it will change your mic technique and your delivery. An audio-visual script, you don't want to be quite so loud and you don't want to be quite so upfront with everything. You are playing second string, you're playing backup to the visuals on screen. You want to support them, you don't want to override them. As an audio-only script, you're very much so in the clear to be the kind of character you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But audiobooks do something very, very different and very, very interesting when it comes to character work. They are not quite as open to as much interpretation as, say, an animation script or a video game script is. You may have heard that there are certain lines in some of your favorite games or in certain animes, anime that have been ad-libbed, or sorry, animation as well, just random Western animation as well, that have been ad-libbed and added in by the actors. In fact, many lines by the actor who voiced Handsome Jack in Borderlands 2 were very much so ad-libbed and were kept in the game because he was just such a solid character actor with the whole thing. So audiobooks are not that. You have to know what's going on with the story, and you have to keep your mind focused on the story, focused on specifically what's going on. So that starts with an overall tone. So what is the tone of this particular book, of this section that we're reading? Let's get some 1 or 2 word
Feels-
descriptions out there of it.
Dark and cold is what I feel.
Dark and cold?
Pessimistic.
Pessimistic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think melodramatic
Somber is a good
kind
one.
of fits it well. It has that melodrama feel to it.
The ones I come up with are tired and bitter.
Tired and bitter. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with melodrama per se, specifically because melodrama has more of that sort of, drama aspect to it. It's like, he said, she said kind of stuff. It's at least that's what I think when I think melodrama. I think like, a teenage girl schoolyard bickering. But maybe I have it all wrong.
I'm thinking a little more along the lines of like a stage play, but it's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then in that context, yes, but
it's coming from my seasoned age.
But yeah, there was some other ones that were listed in chat. There was like lonely. There was somber.
Yeah, there's that in there. Yes.
Yeah, so those are all really, really good. It's mainly negative. It's mainly very negative.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, tragic and grim. Those are some great ones. These are all really awesome to sort of note down and keep in mind when you're trying to read it. Now, the character of this narrator has a very unique character to them. What were some things that you noticed about the narrator's character as you were either listening to it or reading through it? What are some main character points of this narrator?
That's like somebody who's lived there, who's experienced what these people have experienced.
So like involved.
Yeah. So he's talking from firsthand and not just, well, this is what I heard. But
okay, so they're familiar with the situation.
He knew what happened. He knew, what happened to these people and what the world was like for them.
For me, it feels like it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cal. And I'll go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say it almost feels like they're not that interested in what they're talking about, or like it's just like because they say in the first sentence they say, or I guess the second sentence they say, get it over with and move on to more interesting things. So I almost want to say that like they're not that interested in what they're talking about, or they're like, this is just normal. They like think this is just what happens.
Okay. That's him.
So what I think is that it's either like someone who what Kyle pointed out is like someone who knows what's going on, right? So it's like either a higher being or or maybe it's like what I imagine is like a psychiatric doctor. So he comes like, oh, you are here. Let's start with this. And then he tells him the story without like caring that much. Is how I felt. That's what I felt like. Described it as cold.
Okay. Terrell said it's like he's a friend who's been there, and the main character, been where the main character is, and they know where they're going. Yeah, I agree with something like that. I also see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this character, who's the narrator, has a little bit of snark to them as well, a little bit of an attitude, a little bit of kind of like a flair, so to speak.
My interpretation, I think that the narrator is sort of like, do you guys know The Sims?
Mhm.
The game The Sims. So he's like the player, and the woman is one of his Sims.
Okay, so
That's
definitely
my
omniscient.
feeling for it. Like, okay, he sees what she's going through all the time, right? So, which is why he thinks like, she's an old hat at this by now, like, but all the suffering, and also she doesn't really care much because it's just a game. That's what I get from this.
Okay, so some detachment.
Yeah, some detachment, but like half interested, half not really care.
Okay, interesting. All right. Again, I don't have like specific answers to any of this because I didn't voice this project, so I don't 100% know. But I would agree with the sort of overarching view. Like, they know more than they're letting on. They're a little bit snarky, a little bit detached with what's going on, but sort of want to play up the things that are happening in the scene. And the reason why I bring that up is because in the second paragraph, where it starts with, she will cover Uche's broken little body. So there's a little aside in there, and it's broken out by the hyphens, by the dashes. So it says, she will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark. That's a personal note. It's almost like robotic. It's something they've been over again and again and again. It's kind of like calling back to the times where maybe she has tucked him into bed and wanted to avoid getting anything on his face and leaving like a light on at night because he's so terrified of the dark. It's just this narrator sort of keeps those personal asides into, or in with, should I say, their narration. So I think trying to develop a sense of familiarity with these people, with what's going on screen, is a major key to this. Like, you need to know where this is going and what's happening. Terrell mentioned it's kind of like the narrator's the husband of the woman, but it isn't shown until the end. Yeah, that's another good way of looking at it. Somebody who's intimately familiar with the inner workings of this person and their life and everything like that. So how can we go ahead and communicate that? What are some main points in the script that we can use to communicate familiarity? Like, we know what's going on with the people and with the world.
Well, one thing that
Oh, there we go.
one thing that I get is there in the middle of the last paragraph, where it's ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus, yada yada. That part I see delivered almost like it's boring.
Okay. Yeah, Huang brought up the afraid of the dark part. Definitely, that's one of those places where you can add some of that familiarity. One of the things that I find really interesting is in the very first paragraph. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we get it over with and move on to more interesting things? What could be more interesting than the end of the world? Like, come on. Obviously there's something more that's going to be going on, and I think that's a good place to sort of emphasize some of that familiarity. And something that you could do with that is sort of say it almost flippantly. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we get it over with and move on to more interesting things? Play up the interesting of the stuff that's coming in the future. So I think that might be a good way to start with something like this, because it's sort of written that way, to make you think what could be more interesting than the literal apocalypse, than the world going bye-bye. That's kind of what it's hinting at here. Another place is actually at the beginning of the first paragraph there. It says first, a personal ending. So you're almost going down a list. It's like you have in front of you all of the events that are going down on like a checklist, and you're like, oh, let's go ahead and take care of that one first. So that one sort of, again, a lot of this is supposed to breed a sense of you're familiar with people, you're familiar with what's going on. Where are some other places in the script that is that denotes that, or that sort of trying to communicate that connection to the characters?
Well, you definitely get some familiarity with the neither ending is for the first time. It's old hat. So yeah, definitely seen it and done it before.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, I don't know.
It's like she's lost more than just her son. She's lost other family members. She's lost maybe a husband, and
maybe other children.
And maybe other children. It goes deep with loss. I mean, there's a lot of that right there. She's familiar with loss, very familiar with it. It's like it pays her a visit often,
And so often, in fact, that even though it's tragic, you just don't even really care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. In case you weren't familiar with that, old hat means you're familiar with it. This isn't your first rodeo. You've gone through it again and again and again. So she's old hat at this by now. Something to be really, really careful of is at the beginning of that second major paragraph. So after the what she thinks, then which starts with, and it is her bitter, weary self. Be really careful, because there's a bunch of commas in there that your brain is going to want to sort of break up as different ideas, but they're not. They're different descriptions of the same idea. So the two ideas in there are bitter, weary self and bewildered, shocked self. So your natural inclination would be, and it is her bitter, weary self that answers, but the way it's supposed to be read is, but it is her bitter, weary self. So my suggestion is, if you've copied off, or if you can copy off the script onto something where you can actually edit the text itself, I always encourage people to use square brackets, like bracket the ideas together, make sure that they are locked together. Bitter, weary self is one idea. Bewildered, shocked self is another idea. And you need to make sure that it is the two separate selves. This is an inner monologue with her. She's talking to herself from both of these absolutely negative aspects of her personality. So that's one to be really careful of. So there are a set of dashes in the middle of that big long paragraph that lead to, but you need context. That's trying to indicate something. What do you think that that's really trying to tell the reader to do, or what do you think it's really trying to communicate there? Because I don't think a section like that should be ignored. Clearly, they put a ton of dashes in there for a reason.
Just have a pause and like wait. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just maybe have a pause and like, but now he will be, and then wait a few, maybe like a second or two, and then, but you need context, or maybe something like that.
I see it as a change in the narrator's focus, and you go from talking about this she, whoever she is, and then going to addressing, oh, you, the audience, you are confused. Here is what's going on.
Yeah, this is the narrator showing the fact that they are a thinking person. Something has occurred to them. It's occurred to them that, oh, wait, you don't actually know what's going on outside. So it's kind of like that, oh, right moment where, you know, you have, I don't know if you've ever done this. I know I've done it before, but where you sort of go off on a tangent explaining something and then you realize you never actually give context to that tangent. I unfortunately do to my wife all the time, and she reminds me of that. But it's sort of that whole idea of, oh, right. Let me back up just a hair to the beginning of the world, you know. So those are some things to be really
It's his way of
mindful
saying, let me give you context without saying, let me give you context.
Well, I mean, it sort of is saying, let me give you context,
Yeah.
but you need context.
Without using the word, let me give you context. Okay. Or
Right,
phrase.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a few words to be really careful of as well. There is dynamism. So like dynamic, but dynamism. It's the process of being dynamic. Continentally. So obviously we're sort of bringing the focus out from just this one person and their home and whatever's going on in it to the world, to everything, to this planet, to what's going on with it. So continentally. What are some other ones? Right, there is a unique name in this as well. Normally there will be a pronunciation guide, or if it is an actual audiobook project, the author or the director, whoever's in charge of the project, will usually give you some direction on specifically how to say it. So let's go ahead and agree on uche. So, you know, long U, is that the long U or is it a short U? I don't know, but uche. We'll just go with uche.
Yeah. I would just put O-O.
Yeah, Chay. That would be the pronunciation.
Just to help to pronounce it.
Uche. But yeah, this and that's going to be really common in fantasy books. Is they're always going to use very unique titles and names for things, and you can't always assume because this is coming from somebody's imagination, and maybe they want to use certain pronunciation rules from other languages as well.
I mean, quite literally, my head pictures an anime immediately with a name like Uche. I mean, you know,
right. But
like the Japanese people do anything other than animes.
Well, manga too, and they're really killing it with manga as well.
Well, it's a fabulous art form. I mean, absolutely. And over there, everybody from 9 to 90 either reads mangas or watches anime. I mean, it's as regular as telenovelas in certain countries. So, I mean, you know, it's a really awesome thing.
But let's see, is there any other parts of the script that we need to go over? Anything else that maybe stuck out that to any of you that we haven't quite hit yet that maybe you would like a little bit more context on or a little bit more discussion on?
I was a little bit curious on how to do the italicized lines, like, but he was free and he wasn't, not really, but now he will be. Like, do we... Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to doing characters in an audiobook, you have two schools of thought. One of them is that the actor needs to be versatile enough to give every character a unique voice and be able to keep that up. I forget, what was his name?
Jim Dale for the win.
Sir Jim Dale, in his narration of the Harry Potter books, does that. He gives every single character in the book a unique voice and constantly sticks to those all throughout. So Sir Jim Dale is a great example of that. But most audiobook narrators will just give each character or their dialogue a slight emotional change to it, or give yourself just a slight little bit of space. I'm going to go ahead and say that can be your choice. If you want to give this person a character, if you feel confident giving this person a voice and sticking with that voice throughout the entire narration, then good on you. But if you just want to give it a slight emotional change, that works too. And that one is a little bit more open to interpretation.
Yeah, it seems to me like the main point is that those italicized lines are no longer the narrator talking. It's the inner voice of she, whoever she is.
Right, right. And for this, we're also going to give the prologue and the You Are Here a read as well. Because
Okay.
if somebody's actually listening to this, if this is an audiobook project, you need to let them know where they are in the book. So we'll go ahead and give prologue and then the subtext and then start up. So think of it almost like a slate.
I thought it was part of his story. Like, oh, you were here. Let's start. Like, but yeah, makes sense now.
This is your bookmark.
Yeah, basically.
You want us to read the title line too?
No, we don't need to read the title line.
Okay.
But yeah, just the prologue, You Are Here, because oftentimes it's really common that authors will give their chapters and prologues individual titles, and You Are Here is the title to the prologue.
Yeah, it's a little thrown by the "you" not being capitalized.
Yeah, but I transcribed this directly from the book, so
Yeah.
I mean, blame it on the author. I mean, that could have been changed. I don't know, but
Yeah,
still.
just adjust it as you mark up your script.
There you go. All right. Anybody else? Does anybody else have any other questions, comments, anything specifically about this? Okay, I've got one last thing that I want to say about this. It's really super important that you have a clear idea of where you want to go. What I mean by that is you need to have, when it comes to storytelling, you need to know where the beginning, where the middle, and where the end is, so you know how to communicate that. So all of this may be the beginning, but it is leading to bigger things. And you need to understand that all of this will connect together. So everything should make sense when it comes all together. I know that's kind of vague. It's you'll probably get a lot more in-depth and in detailed explanation of specifically what something like that concept would mean if you worked with an audiobook coach. But again, the main idea is you need to know where things are leading. You need to know where you're going next. You yourself, as the narrator, as the reader, needs to have some idea of how to tell this story, of where the beginning is, where the middle is, where the end is, and where everything is leading to. And if not, then you need to be damn good at sounding like you know what the hell's going on. But anyway, let's go ahead and get back into the reads, starting with Leonard. Leonard, go for it.
Okay. Prologue. You Are Here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it, numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think of that?
I like the non-caring tone when it comes to the lay of the land. We talked about like plateaus, yada yada, all that.
Yeah, the
Uh,
pacing felt just a little,
yeah, a little
tiny bit
slow, though.
rushed. And
Oh, actually? Really?
He needed to
I
dial
thought it was
back.
slower.
It was a
I'll
little
split
bit.
the
It was
difference.
slow, for the somber tone that it had, it seems still a little bit too fast in its beats.
Okay.
So
Okay, so you're a little bit too slow fast. Please,
kind of.
I don't know. Do
Well,
something
I'll
maybe go
about
speed
with
up
that.
a little more slowly.
I
then.
think
Yeah.
you need to just adjust your pauses. I mean, don't go Christopher Walken on it, but just adjust your pauses just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, well, give us another read.
Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it, numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restlessly abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, how about that? How was this one?
Yeah, it sounded like it had better pacing to it as far as the beats went.
I agree.
The thing is that's a little bit quicker than I would generally attribute to audiobook narration, but I think it actually worked. I think it worked out for your performance.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't think I'd have you change it. Yeah, I mean,
Well, then I won't.
The performance itself, though, was really, really solid. Like, I mean, you hit all the different points. You definitely sounded like that narrator that we were talking about earlier, somebody who's familiar but sort of detached with what's going on. So I think all in all, the performance was solid. You just needed that slight little bit of an adjustment, and it worked out. So, yeah, you hit it.
Thank you.
You should consider doing voiceover.
Maybe I will someday.
All right, moving right along. Hatim.
All right. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she as she imagines as she imagines as she imagines how her own son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uchi's broken body. She will cover Uchi's broken little body with a blanket except his. She will cover Uchi's broken little. She will cover Uchi's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat with this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. And now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, read continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus, canyons and rivers. Mountains and plateaus, canyons and river deltas. The usual. Ordinary, except for its size. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed. Lying like an old man, lying restlessly. Like an old man, lying restlessly. Okay, don't know. Like an old man, lying restlessly. Slow down. Like an old man, lying restlessly. Too slow. Like an old man. Okay, I broke the down rule. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and stop you right there now because it's
sorry.
To the point where you're hanging yourself up. Nope, do not
Yeah,
apologize. Do not apologize.
Oh, yes.
I don't apologize.
There is no reason to apologize.
Yeah.
Everybody has their VO hangups. That's okay.
Mhm.
One of the things that I will say, though, is definitely practice reading aloud for longer stretches of time.
Yeah.
If you have an opportunity, if you do read on your off time, if it is something that you like to do personally, then take a little bit to read aloud for a while.
Yeah.
That's gonna really help you out with these kinds of narrations. So let's go ahead and get into your performance for this. So I'm opening it up. What did everybody think?
I really believe that as he practices and gets flexible and more confidence behind him when it comes to approaching a read like this, you will do well in narration. Yeah, I believe that. And where you did not stumble, it was hitting it and it was good.
Thank you.
I can honestly,
Can you tell me what was hitting so I can
I mean,
Try
I mean,
improve it?
the places that didn't make you stumble, which is mostly around mostly was around certain words, names, phrases, but at the same time as you started out, you had a good pacing tone. Your vocal tone was just right for the way you're reading this. You were approaching it with that kind of quietness and kind of a reverence toward what you were reading.
Thank you.
If I can jump in for a bit, I want to I actually completely agree with that. I think you started off really strong. I think you sort of started stumbling around the second paragraph, but for the bit that you did have, you did really well. This might be a kind of a personal preference thing, but I wasn't a huge fan of how you changed the voice for the woman's voice. I wasn't a huge fan of that. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if that's just a personal thing, but I personally was not a huge fan of it.
Do not apologize for that. I heard that.
And I'm
sorry.
I'm
Oh,
also
damn it.
I'm also not sure if this was just like because of the Dan roll breaking or whatever, but it almost felt like in the second paragraph like you were smiling a little bit, which kind of threw off a little bit of the tone of the piece.
Yeah, I did. I was smiling because of laughing. It was like, oh, I'm messing up. Oh shit, I broke down rule. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Terrell, you had something you wanted to say, or Kyle, were you done?
Oh yeah, that was all. I was done.
Okay. Terrell, you had something you wanted to say?
As a person who, like, I love audiobooks and I listen to them not regularly, but enough to where I'm like, okay, I can enjoy this. Honestly, the parts where you were going through reading Calm, like I could listen to that all day and not get tired, honestly. I can agree with Kyle. I didn't necessarily like the change for the woman's voice, but again, that's just me. But other than that, the parts where you were reading and it was calm and you went into it almost with an air of confidence, you really did well. And if you were to tell me that you were doing an audiobook, I'd go pick it up right now just to listen.
better read more so I can practice this.
Yeah.
Well, it's
no,
easy to practice.
Yeah. I actually would agree with a lot of the feedback that you received. Don't do the voice change. Just do the emotional change.
All right.
Just change your
All right.
emotional state for that. And I am going to say it is because of the quality of your voice. I mean, it's not like going into a falsetto comes off very naturally for your tone and for your narration. So just stick to the soul and the core of what's being said, the emotional space you're trying to achieve. But yeah. So this is why breaking the Dan rule is such a violation for us, is because you start getting self-conscious and you start pulling farther and farther out of the read. As you stumbled over the same thing again and again and again, you were losing more and more of that solid performance that you had at the very beginning. So don't be afraid of long stretches of text. It's just words you've seen before. You know, if you speak English, normally they're pretty good. Sometimes some authors aren't really great about the kinds of accessible English that they use. I've listened to and read my fair share of authors where I've gone through an entire paragraph 3 or 4 times and I'm like, what did they just say? So that does happen. But I mean, clearly you can speak English very, very well. So I'm not going to make any comment on that. There's none to make. And I'm assuming that with the exception of a few of the words that are in here, these are all things that you're familiar with and you've seen over and over again. The only reason why I bring that up is just because there's a lot of them doesn't mean you need to be afraid of them. Because I know that sometimes that can throw people off. They see a massive stack of words and they're like, holy crap. But I'm sure as you've seen, it goes by fairly quick. Like, I mean, this is one of the longer scripts that we've had, and we're already 2 people in.
Yeah, the biggest problem that I was hearing is that when you messed up, it threw you off. So what you'll need to learn to do is to just forget it ever happened, go back to the beginning of the sentence or the beginning of the paragraph or beginning of something, and just do it again. And forget it ever happened and forget it ever went wrong.
All right.
And as far as the voice change goes, somebody's echoing me. As far as the voice change goes, I agree with Michael. You don't need to sound like a woman. You just need to pick up the attitude of this woman and convey the attitude convey the attitude in your own voice even.
Am
you
I
wanted
the
to say
only one
something?
who likes the voice change part? I feel like I'm the only one who likes that.
You may just be.
Yeah, because I'm not sure how to say it. Maybe I think like the voice doesn't sound good, but I think like he nails the emotion that she was having at that part. Like when I heard that, like it actually hit me. Like okay, she's relieved that he will be free now, and I think that maybe the voice change isn't necessary because a lot of people doesn't like it, but I think the emotional is there, and I love the emotional part of that.
Yeah, and I think you're echoing exactly what it is that we've been saying. Is we don't need the voice change, but the emotional change that was there was the most important part. So let's go ahead and actually start you from where you had the most issue from the second paragraph onwards. So we'll go with from what she thinks to the end. Go for it.
What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Writ continentally. Here is a land. It is an ordinary as lands go. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas. The usual. Ordinary. Except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restlessly. Abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people named. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, what did everybody think?
I heard that struggle, and I think you kind of almost let loose like a little bit of a chuckle, but I think by the time that you got to the end of it, I think you fixed it up. I think you got it good.
Thank you. Because I was nervous because of within it up.
You did a much better job of not getting thrown off when you messed up.
Yeah.
Right.
Good
Right.
job.
You did. You just let it go. That's the most important skill I think you need to take from this today. Just for your personal reads. Don't let yourself get thrown up by the screw ups. Get thrown off by the screw ups. That's fine. That happens. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like Elsa, just like, just like in Frozen, just let it go. All right. I hope we don't get claimed or anything for that, but still, just let it go. That is why we have editing. That's why there is always an editor. It's because mess ups happen. I mean, I don't care how many years in experience in the studio you have. I don't care how experienced you are. You're going to mess up, and that's totally fine. It's 100% expected, and that's why there's a budget for it.
Yeah.
So
I should learn that because I usually like. Yeah, I should fucking. Oh, sorry, I swear. I should learn that.
Yes, I'm not the only one F-bombing. Nice. There you go, Hutton.
Oh, Lord.
But yeah, I should learn that because like I usually spend like 3 hours on like a single audition because like, oh nope, this is bad, and yeah, I redo it.
With when it comes to auditions, when it comes to auditions, you do want to try to get a full solid take in, but don't spend your time judging it because that's ultimately up to whoever's sent out the audition.
The only time I will caveat that is on a script like this, where it's going to be a long piece, like an audiobook. You're not going to get a full read. You're just not. And if you are, that doesn't really make you all that skilled. Like some of the best narrators in the world are still going to have to punch and roll because they make, it's not like they go 7 pages without a mistake. It just doesn't happen. So something like this, you can expect to, again, just you're going to go right back to the mistake, punch in and roll forward.
Yep.
So don't stress about that stuff, man.
So overall, though, the performance is good. The biggest note is just practice reading on your own for longer than, some shorter scripts. But let's go ahead and move on, shall we? Kyle, you're up.
Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abled, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, let's open it up. What did everybody think?
I like the uncaring tone. I just have one thing to note is that you went a bit too fast on the description of the land. It kind of, I don't know, maybe you kind of like strained the breath maybe at the end there is what I felt.
Yeah, being that this is not commercial copy, you can just take your time on certain phrases, words, and sentences.
So
It'll help
there are
the
a
emotion
couple,
of it.
there are a couple specific points that I wanted to bring up. So towards the end of that first paragraph, the world that's ending outside, the world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. You really attacked those endings, like end, quite hard. So it was something like, and she will pay no attention to world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. So you hit those endings really hard. I'd like for you to bring the emphasis off of the ending. The world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her. Like those are the most important parts. The world that is ending outside, the world that is ending within her, and that neither one of the endings are her first.
I was going to point out the same thing. I was also going to mention, and this is less a performance thing and more of a technical dealing with where you're going to have to sit narration wise with your peaks. You jumped in with, but you need context. You had great,
be my next point.
You had the right energy, but too much volume. You're gonna spike it so high that your RMS is never going to recover, and you're going to have to hit with a limiter. So have that same energy, but if you need to either pull back just a shade on the mic, or when you go in and get quieter. But you need context so that you don't have that big volume spike. The other thing is exactly what everybody said. Take your time, man. You are painting. You are painting a picture that you're going to be, you're basically prepping the canvas that you're going to paint the rest of the story on, take your time and lay it out for the person who's listening, because they don't have the benefit of the text to go back to.
All right. So now that we've bombarded you enough with that, why don't you go ahead and give us another read?
One word note that I want to throw in there. It's lying restlessly abed.
Right.
I think you said it in your cold read as well as abled, and it's abed.
Ah. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with, and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then, and thereafter, is, but he was free, and it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Much better approach this time around.
Yeah.
Much
fantastic.
better approach this time around. It was
Very
much
good.
easier to follow along with what was going on. But opening it up, what did everybody else think?
I agree, it was much better. It felt to me like you were emotionally vested in the story, which I didn't quite get that feeling the first time around. So good.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't here for the discussion. So this is less about your performance, Kyle, and more a question for everyone. I heard a really good touch of connection with the pain that she is feeling, in that he wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But I didn't feel that connection in the first, we guess technically the second paragraph, where describing Uche's broken little body, except his face. Is that an overall directorial we've decided on this choice, or was this more you were just keeping with the kind of detached nature of the way the story started?
Well, we agreed sort of that the narrator had a somewhat detached feel to them. There is, although in that description there is sort of like a personal aside with that, except his face because he's afraid of the dark. That's sort of the indication that she, again, whomever she is holding on to some echoes of the past that they can't quite come to terms with. So it is overall mostly detached.
Okay. I think, as you say, in that little personal aside, except his face, I feel like there could be a little more of a touch of emotion that you also get in that he wasn't, not really. But other than that, I thought the pacing was much better. So market improvement.
Yeah, overall, really, really solid. But let's go ahead and move it right along then, shall we? Darrell, you're up.
right. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing that she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines her now son. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines her son died and tries to prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines her son now died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except for his face because he's afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it, numb. And she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and what she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers the almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Writ, continue. Writ.
Continentally, like continental breakfast.
Okay, cool. That's writ continentally. Here is a land that is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus and canyons, and river deltas, the usual, ordinary, except for the size of its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land, like an old man lying restlessly abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, opening it up. Let's get some feedback going.
I thought you
So-
made an interesting choice, an interesting acting choice at the beginning, where instead of detached and disinterested, you almost took on a weary approach. Like, well, let's start with the end if we have to. I kind of heard an Eeyore read. And I did. I thought that was a very interesting choice. And it changed the tone of the piece for me. That sentence you struggled with, as she imagines how her son died, rather than her son now died. It's as she imagines how her son died. But what I would say is, like I say, when you record something like this, you're going to punch and roll. You're going to go right back to the last place where you paused. You're going to set your cursor and you're going to wipe everything forward and start recording over it. So don't go all the way back to prologue. Go back to the comma over and over in the days to come. Start right there. Shift D as she imagines. The last thing I would say is, because of the acting choice you made, your pacing was good, but you sort of trailed off on a lot of the sentences. and it got kind of breathy, where it almost sounded like you were sighing at the end of each sentence. And after a while, that's going to kind of grate on a reader's ear, where they're going to feel almost drawn down or pulled down because of the depressive nature of it. So don't let it overpower the entire read.
So, Darrell, were you nervous with this one?
A little bit, yeah. Honestly.
All right, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. The nerves did come through. What were you most nervous about? Was it messing up, or was it just the length of the script?
It wasn't the length of the script. It was like messing up.
Okay. Yeah. I got that feeling. I got that feeling because you stopped paying attention to where the story was going and more about trying to get what was right off the bat. And it went from a storytelling read to reading the individual words. And I mean, I'm just pointing it out. I'm not beating up on you or anything like that.
Yeah, no,
it's
fine.
It's a natural thing that most people do when they're nervous, particularly when it comes to long form narration, is that when they want to get everything right, you stop trying to tell the story and start trying to get the words right. So let's just read the first paragraph. Actually, no. Let's not even do that. Let's just do first to she's old hat at this by now. So first a personal ending to she's old hat at this by now. Now, one thing to be really careful of is, just like was brought up before, you skipped how in when you were leading into that sentence that you kept having some struggles with. So there's a thing that she will think over and over again in days to come as she imagines how her son died.
Okay, got you.
That's what was, I think that was one of the main things that was throwing you off in that sentence.
Yeah.
So
right.
There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. This is, do you know the legend of Sisyphus, or the story of Sisyphus? That sound familiar to you? Okay, so Sisyphus, it's a Greek story where there is a man named Sisyphus who is cursed to roll a boulder up a hill for all of eternity. But he's cursed to roll a boulder up a hill, and if he's able to make it to the top, he's freed from this particular task. But on the way up this hill, there's always something that makes him stumble and fall or lose the boulder, and it always goes back down. That is his curse, and that is his eternal punishment, is to constantly try to push this boulder up the hill. That's what this is sort of talking about. You know, trying to make sense of something so senseless. This is a Sisyphean task. There is no end to it. So what I want you to focus on is her. I want you to focus on the scene. I want you to see this woman just slumped on the floor, on her knees, next to her child who has been taken from her in a way that she just cannot grasp. Try to pay attention to that and try to feel that, and then go for it. So start from first a personal ending, and then she's old hat at this by now. Go for it.
First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except for his face because he is afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it numb. And she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her. And neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now.
That was a markedly different read. That was dripping with a lot more emotion and a lot more feeling to it. And that really changed up the read. Your focus was then no longer on the words, but on the emotion. and you really communicated that well. At least that's what I got from it. What did everybody else think? What did you all think?
Yeah, I heard a story there.
Yeah.
Same. I think one of the biggest differences, Terrell, you're always going to, like I said, with a piece like this, you're always going to have stumbles. Very rarely especially if you think like big name audiobook narrators, very rarely have they actually read the piece cover to cover as they're recording it. So in many cases, they're hitting the words for the first time. Just having that innate sense of not just being a storyteller, but making a choice as an actor, picking a direction you want to go. And like Michael said, using that storytelling sense, every line is going to make such a huge difference. So that, because, unlike, where Hatem was talking earlier about spending 3 hours on an audition, this is the actual performance, and it's go and stop. And you get one take because it's, 85,000 words, and you don't get to do that 3 or 4 times.
So then, Terrell, was it easier to focus on the emotion and on the scene rather than the words?
Okay, so what was happening like while you were describing it? Once I stopped, took a second, closed my eyes, and actually pictured, because the way I pictured it in my head was she's in a field, there's this rickety old wooden shack, and there's the grave, her and her son, and she's holding him, but she's sobbing quietly. So once I was able to picture that in my head, I was like, okay, now I got it, and went with it.
That is huge. You put yourself into the story, and the words came afterwards. So there you go. And that was fantastic. It absolutely transformed your read. So it looks like we're going to need to do a little bit more practice with you specifically when it comes to emotional states, because it seems like that's your strength. All right, moving right along. Nathan, you're up.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful time for my mouth to go dry, huh? All right. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he's afraid of the dark. Because he is afraid of the dark. She will sit beside it, numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world that has already ended. The world has already ended with her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus, canyons and river deltas, the usual, ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think?
Oh, the silence.
Right?
I feel like I'm always the first one, so I'm just like somebody else. Go.
Oh, Jake,
So-
please be the first one.
Fuck it. Why not? I will say your first sentence came across very different than the acting choices you made the rest of the way through. The first sentence sounded almost villainous because it wasn't detached, it wasn't tired, it wasn't any of those things. It was, let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we? There was a little bit of a grin there.
Okay.
And the rest of the way through was a much more consistent character as the narrator, but I still felt like you were almost overly emotionally invested in the whole story. There wasn't that sense of detachment. And so when you get to the little joke of after describing how the land moves, of course they named it the stillness, you didn't have that sort of dry wit to it. And so it fell flat. It didn't come across as irony. It came across as the narrator doesn't know what irony means.
I was
So
kind of thinking a really similar thing. Like it seemed that detachment wasn't there. It seemed like you were too emotionally it seemed like you were too emotionally invested. You're too nice.
Okay.
So
I would say dial
villainous-
down the drama 2 notches.
Okay.
Okay, so then let's do just the second paragraph, starting with, and it is her bitter, weary self. So from there on.
And it is her and it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus, canyons and river deltas, the usual, ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot. This land, like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, what did everybody think of that one? Jake?
Telling you, man, I'm trying to wait for everybody else, but I at this point I already know.
Oh, you're doing
I'll
so
just-
good, Jake. You're doing
I'll
so
be
good.
the
You're a
asshole.
great director.
I liked it much better. I thought that was a much stronger acting choice for that paragraph. I do, or I would. I don't know if we have time to keep doing it. Probably not. But I would want you to slow down. As soon as you got into here is a land, detached doesn't mean in a hurry to get it over with. You still want to paint for the reader, or for the listener. It's more of a tonal choice than it is a tempo choice. And I felt like you had the right tone, but your tone, instead of being, most of this is ordinary except for this, was more, most of this is ordinary except for this.
I got you.
I was about to say the same thing, but since Jake goes first all the time, so yeah.
I'm telling you guys, jump in, please, please, pretty please.
Jake
Sugar on
is
top.
working on being a director. He's going to be a good one right there.
Well, thank you, Jake, because usually it's been me doing that. So it's nice to have somebody else do it.
Well, then, yeah, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to go ahead and skip my spot. Huang, why don't you go ahead and give us the next read?
We have Michael S., or did he run away?
He's left, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, it's my turn now? What?
Yes, it is. It is your turn now.
Why did you skip over? Come on, man. I wasn't ready. Okay.
Okay, fine. I'll do a quick read if you
I
want
was
me
joking. I was joking. Yeah.
to. Okay. No, yeah, go for it. Go for it.
But seriously, I wasn't really. prologue, you are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There's a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and now the ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered shock self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Don't worry, Jake. I'll save you from going first this time. I will go. So, what kind of narration or what kind of voiceover is it that you want to get into, Kwon?
Honestly, I have no idea because, I just got into the whole voiceover thing, just got
And that's
into my
fine.
head like maybe a few weeks ago, and I'm now just looking for classes and workshops and stuff like that. So I have
Okay.
not really an
So
idea.
you don't have like a kind of voiceover that is really appealing to you. You wouldn't want to do character work for, say, video games or anime, or medical narration, for like massive companies and big, multi-level conglomerate, and not multi-level, but
Okay,
multi-company
okay.
conglomerates and things like that.
I think I'm interested in like video games and animation
games?
stuff like
Okay.
that. Yeah. That's
So
just-
one of the things that I've noticed is your storytelling in this was rather strong. Like, it was very easy to follow along with what you were saying, with the direction that you were going. It was all very, very well laid out. So you already have a leg up in that sense. Audiobook narration may not necessarily appeal to you, but I would say practice it. You have a knack for telling a story, and I think you might need to expand on that and lean in on that, because everything was
I see.
like, as you got further and further into the script, it seemed like you got more and more comfortable with the read that you were doing, and it came off more and more natural. So maybe at the very, very beginning of the script, it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be, but the more you read, the more involved you became.
I see. Okay. So like the first part is a bit more detached than it should have been, or something like
Absolutely. Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the beginning with your prologue and you are here, it was really sort of, okay, now I have to read. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
And
'cause
then once you got
technically,
into
I wasn't supposed to read yet.
yeah, well,
Gotta shoot your shot, man. Bust your
exactly.
clip. Bust your clip.
But getting into it this time, or getting into it as you got past the first paragraph and as you started getting farther and farther into the script, you got more and more into the read, and that's a strength. So
Okay.
One thing I
It-
will mention, and especially since you say you're just now kind of getting started with getting into voiceover,
Yeah.
in almost every style of voiceover that you will ever come across, in almost every script you will ever come across, you really want to be talking to someone. And I
Okay.
mean, and I don't mean, well, like, yeah, I'm not just saying the words. I mean, you need to have in mind someone specific that you are talking to, know their name, know their face. because, especially with a narration like this, the narrator starts by including him, her, or their self with, let's start with the end. Why don't we? So imagine right off the bat that you are talking to someone else and you are telling that person this story. And you'll get sort of your sea legs, your conversational legs under you a little bit faster, because I completely agree with Michael. By the end, man, you were hitting your stride and just walking right through the story. But at the beginning, you know, it was very clear that you felt you weren't ready to read. And in many cases, I can tell you that I've heard from countless voice actors that if you ever get into a booth with a director and they say go is many times like the fifth word you hear. They might say, hi, hope you're feeling good, and then go. So you gotta jump right off at the beginning.
Yep, got it. Okay.
So
that might
one thing to
a
take
bit
advantage of that. One thing to take advantage of that. We're just going to do it really short, really quick.
Yeah.
Start at like an old man lying restlessly in bed. So right at the very end. So read from like an old man lying restlessly in bed all the way through the end, and then go back to the top with prologue and just read that first paragraph, ending at first a personal ending.
Wait, so where do I end? And
You're going to end after you read Get It Over With and move on to more interesting things.
Okay.
So what you're going
one-
to do is you're going to start at the end, you're going to read through the end, and then you're going to go back up to the beginning, starting with prologue, and you're going to go all the way through until Get It Over With and move on to more interesting things.
Okay.
One
Leonard is
note
gonna
that
say something.
Yeah, I got one thing to add there. The overall tone that I got was that while it did definitely improve as it went through the story, it felt to me like you didn't really care about the story. It was like you could just as easily have been reading Joe was walking his dog down the street. It was an overcast day, and instead of this woman who had a kid die and the world is ending.
Okay, so like a bit more emotional.
Yeah.
So you had a question? What was that?
No. I was just asking what Leonard was wanting to say. So yeah. Okay.
So a little bit more emotion. Start from like an old man lying restlessly in bed, go back up to the top, starting with prologue, and then ending with Get It Over With and move on to more interesting things. Go for it.
Okay. Like an old man lying restlessly in bed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and shallow swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Prologue, you are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. How's that?
Yeah, so that was a technique to try to utilize that momentum you had towards the end of the script and bring it up to the top. I think it worked out. I think your beginning sounded a lot more connected.
Okay.
It's a technique similar to what people call a ramp, where you come up with a sentence or a phrase or two to get you connected to the script before you actually start reading the script. You say that, and then it leads it right in. And I agree. I think it took advantage of your connection that you felt at the end of this and brought it back up to the top. So that's a good little trick you can use.
All right. Moving right along. Vincent, you're up. Would you like to read for us?
I would like to.
All right, go for it.
All
right. So starting with prologue.
Okay. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we? Get it over with. Move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in days to come. As she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless, she will cover each broken little body with a blanket except his face, if he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither the ending is for the first time. She's old. She's old hat at this by now. What what she thinks and thereafter is, but he was free. And it's her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to reproduce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need contact. Let's try the ending again. Like content with content continentally spiritual land. It is ordinary as lands go, mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual, ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed. It heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land, people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think of that read? Sorry, let me. Oh, okay.
I will give you, Vincent, you've been practicing. You sounded very confident, and that was excellent. As far, I mean, you had confidence behind you on your read.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a really solid storytelling read.
Yeah.
You did, you did stumble around just a little bit on a couple words. That's okay. They're a little bit strange, but you picked it up really, really well.
Nicely done, Vincent.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Yes.
Somebody was calling me.
It's all right. It felt like the biggest thing I would say now is it felt like once your confidence was shaken by the words you stumbled over, you lost your connection to the story. Like especially for those of us that have been here with you, over the months and weeks and so forth, and have heard your reads get better as you practice. I can tell the connection that you were attempting in that first paragraph. And as soon as you started getting into where you stumbled over writ continentally, and then you got to plateaus and canyons and dynamism, when you hit those words, your confidence faltered and it stopped sounding like you were telling a story and started sounding like you were making sure each word was correct. So that's one where you got to keep up that confidence. I'd rather hear you read the word wrong confidently than correctly, but without that good storytelling.
Okay. Let's go one more time.
I don't know if we have the time for a full read. Let's just go ahead and do that last paragraph. And it was her bitter, weary self. Also, one other change when you get to, but you need context, pick it up just a little bit, pick up your emotional state. The rest of it is really somber, leading up to that point. It's really sad. It's really down. But when you get to that point, you're on to something different. It's like, oh, this is interesting, So, but you need context. So let's get to something interesting.
Okay. Like that. Okay.
Yeah. So and it is her bitter, weary self to the end. Go for it.
Come on. Okay. Where's the bitter, weary self? Where's it? Okay. Found it. And it's her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered shock. It is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self managed to produce it. He wasn't not really, but now you will be. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Right, right continentally, here is a land. It is ordinary, as land shows. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot. This land, like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs. It puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is the land of quiet and bitter irony.
All right. Good job. Good job. Again, throughout the time that you've been here with us, and also since you've been, working with a coach, you really have been improving on your reads, like just in general. So I don't really have I don't really have too much to say about that read. It was really solid. It was mostly what we were looking for. Just keep up that practice. Whatever you're doing to practice, keep going. It's really paying off. It's really paying off.
I would agree. The one thing I would say is these are the kinds of scripts I'd rather see you practicing in your spare time. Longer scripts where you're going to come across words that you don't see on a regular basis or that you don't hear in a lot of the media you normally consume, right? You don't come across continentally in many commercials, right? There's not a lot of anime that brings up the word continentally. So just things like that challenge you and really make you keep reading longer periods out loud are really going to keep building that confidence. But it's definitely, I love to see it, man.
And thank you. And luckily, this week I'm buying me a laptop Wednesday. I found it for a good price, a laptop with a camera on it, with a video camera on that, like what?
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, that's going to be great. Well, let's go ahead and move on because we are running over time for sure. Jake.
All right, let me pause. Let me mute myself.
Yeah, Jake, you're our last reader. Go for it from the top.
Okay. Prologue. You are here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come, as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark. And she will sit beside it, numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try that again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary, as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay, what did everybody think? Opening it up. Well, since Jake can't go first on this one, I will go first. So you totally missed a section. You said, but let's try that again, writ continentally. Instead of saying, but let's try the ending again, writ continentally. So that was my one complaint. I think the rest of it was solid. Anybody else?
Easy to
Opening it up.
catch.
I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, for the most part, definitely.
I thought it started really strong. I had a couple notes there towards the end. One, the one Michael brought up. Also, you went, it moves a lot. And to me, it moves a lot. Putting more of the emphasis on the a lot makes a little more sense to me. And towards the end, on the very last sentence, I'd like to hear a little more bitter irony in that last sentence as your mental approach to it. But overall, really solid job.
Okay. Nathan, you're unmuted. What do you got?
I think you did a good job of following your own directions.
Fair.
Yeah, I was going to say
Um,
that at the start. So, I mean,
So
All right.
something that I think will help you tie the ending together with the still, with the name, the stillness and quiet and bitter irony. I think you need to make sure that quiet and bitter are together. They are they are describing the irony. Because right now you're separating them, and I'd like to hear you put them together instead of
Okay.
it is a land of quiet and bitter irony. I'd like to hear it is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
Okay. I can
So
do
give
that.
that a try. Let's start
You
from
just take
and it
that
is her
second
bitter, weary
paragraph.
self. Yeah, and it is her bitter, weary self. Go for it.
And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really. But now he will be. But you need context. Let's try that ending again. Writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary, as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary, except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the Stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony.
I think that hit a lot better towards the end, personally.
I think it did
That's
too.
just me.
Yeah.
You still messed up the that ending part again. You said let's try that ending again, but it's let's try the ending again. And you didn't do something this time that you did your first time that caught my attention. You gave at the bottom here when you were after the like an old man lying restlessly abed, when you were describing the land, you gave each of those two pairs of descriptions a little identity in your first read.
I
And you
ran them
totally
together too
removed
much this
that.
time, didn't I?
Well, you didn't run them together, no, because your pacing was great, but you removed all of that unique identity from each of them this time. They were the same two words each time. So were we not as over time as we were, I would ask you to take all of that, but it's really minor. I think the rest of it is absolutely fantastic. Really solid read. Leonard, did you have something to say?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay, cool. Just making sure that I did. Well, anyway, I'm not going to sound like one of those typical YouTubers. So we'll just ask you to, the stuff, it's all down below. Hit the buttons as you see fit, and we'll see you in the next one.
Oh my
You know what to do if you're on YouTube. You already know exactly what to do.
Yes.
All right, later.
Join us every Monday for free script practice. You can also find the Mic Check on Facebook and Twitter. If you liked what you saw, then subscribe for more.